Look around you. Most of the people shouting about kindness and justice are the same ones who don't have the courage to change anything in their own lives. It's easy to appear virtuous. What's hard is actually being virtuous. Have you ever noticed how the loudest people about morals are always the ones who do the least? Those who talk about kindness but never create anything, who preach justice but run from any real risk. Nietzsche had a brutal theory about this. You're surrounded by weaklings who use virtue as a disguise. And today we're going to discover how to identify these false prophets, and more importantly, how not to become one of them. The first thing you need to understand is how to discover your own true values. Most people live with borrowed values like secondhand clothes that never fit right. They repeat what they heard from their parents, school, television, without ever stopping to ask, does this actually make sense for my life? Nietzsche called this herd morality, and it's exactly what it sounds like. A bunch of sheep following the shepherd without knowing where they're going. These borrowed values work like an invisible straitjacket. You grow up hearing that you need to be nice, that you need to please everyone, that you need to follow the established rules, and then you spend your whole life trying to fit into molds that were never made for you. It's like trying to wear the wrong size shoes. You might be able to walk, but it's always going to hurt. The problem is that society doesn't want you to question these values. It needs you to accept, to obey, to not ask difficult questions, because if everyone started thinking for themselves, the entire system of control would crumble. It's easier to govern people who don't question, who don't think, who just follow. But how do you know if a value is really yours? Simple. It withstands the test of pain. When something you believe cost you something, when defending an idea means losing friends, money, or status, that's when you discover if it's a value or just posing. False virtuous people always abandon their beliefs at the first sign of difficulty. They're like internet activists who talk a lot, but never leave the house. I'll give you a practical example. You know those people who are always posting about helping the poor on social media. They share all kinds of content about inequality, talk about compassion, about how the world needs to change. But when you look at their real life, they've never done volunteer work, never donated a cent, never even talked to a homeless person. Their virtue exists only in the virtual world, and the worst part is they feel superior because of it. They feel more evolved, more conscious, more human than those who don't post these things, but they're actually doing the opposite of what they preach. They're using other people's suffering as fuel for their own ego. It's narcissism disguised as altruism. This type of person has created a light version of goodness, a goodness that costs nothing, that requires no sacrifice, that demands no real action. It's couch goodness, cell phone screen goodness. Goodness that functions only as a symbol of moral status. They collect causes like others collect stamps to show off to others, not to actually use. The problem is that our modern society has created a perfect system for these imposters to thrive. Being authentic has become a crime, while following trends has become virtue. You see this everywhere. People who change their opinions according to which way the wind blows, who adopt causes not out of conviction, but for likes. They don't have principles, they have algorithms. The difference between being authentic and following trends is simple. Authenticity comes from the inside out. Trends come from the outside in. When you're authentic, your actions are born from your experiences, your reflections, your mistakes. When you follow trends, your actions are born from the fear of being left out, of not being accepted, of not seeming modern. It's the difference between having personality and having a persona. Authentic people are rare because authenticity hurts. It requires you to be honest with yourself about your flaws, your limitations, your contradictions. It requires you to accept that not everyone will like you. It requires you to make decisions based on what's right, not what's popular. Those who follow trends live on a constant emotional roller coaster. Today they're defending one thing, tomorrow they're defending another. Not because they changed their mind based on new evidence, but because the dominant opinion changed. They're like boats without anchors carried by the current of whatever opinion is trending. Think about the influences you follow. How many of them do you believe actually live what they preach? How many do you think would continue doing the same things if there was no camera filming? Most are performing a life that doesn't even exist. They've created characters that are more interesting than themselves, and now they're trapped in this lie. These influencers are the perfect symbol of our era. People who sell appearances, who monetize insecurities, who turn their own fakeness into a business model. They discovered that it's more profitable to be a fake version of success than an authentic version of themselves. And the public buys this charade because it's easier to consume someone else's life than to build their own. It's more comfortable to live through the fabricated experiences of influencers than to face your own reality. It's escapism disguised as inspiration. And here we get to the crucial point, the fear of social judgment. This is the fuel of weaklings disguised as virtuous people. They don't do good because they believe in good. They do it because they're afraid of being seen as bad. It's like those people who donate to charity but make sure to post it on Instagram. The motivation isn't to help, it's to seem like a good person. This fear is so strong that they prefer to live completely false lives rather than risk the disapproval of strangers on the internet. They study people's reactions like scientists, adjusting their behavior according to the comments. It's pathetic, but it's also tragic because deep down, they know they're lying, but they can't stop anymore. The fear of social judgment has become a mental prison from which few people can escape. They live in constant performance, always calculating how their words and actions will be received. They've completely lost touch with who they really are underneath all these masks. And the worst part is that this fear is completely irrational. Most people are so busy worrying about what others think of them that they don't have time to judge you. Everyone is trapped in the same collective neurosis of approval. It's like a theater where everyone is on stage and no one is in the audience. Nature had a devastating question for this. What if you had to live your life exactly the same infinite times? Every moment, every choice, every word, everything repeating forever. Would you change anything? This idea called eternal recurrence is like an X-ray of the soul. It reveals who you really are when no one is watching. Most people would panic at this question because they know they're living lives that aren't theirs, making decisions based on what others will think. They're so busy being approved that they forgot how to be. It's like spending your whole life rehearsing for a play that will never premiere. Eternal recurrence isn't about religion or afterlife. It's about total responsibility for your choices. It's about living so authentically and consciously that you wouldn't be ashamed to repeat every moment forever. It's a brutal and necessary test of integrity. Imagine having to repeat forever that conversation where you agreed with something you didn't believe just to avoid conflict. Or that job you hate but keep doing because it's safe. Or that relationship that died years ago, but you don't have the courage to end. Most people's lives are a collection of compromises they didn't want to make. The question of eternal recurrence forces you to confront the real quality of your existence. Not the edited version you post on Instagram, but the complete version with all the moments of cowardice, dishonesty, mediocrity. It's a mirror that doesn't lie. And when you really face this question, two things can happen. Either you despair when you realize how you've wasted your life, or you find the motivation to finally start living it for real. Most choose despair because it's easier, but some choose transformation. But there is a way out, and it involves something nature called transforming adversities into strength. It's not that cheap motivational talk of everything happens for a reason. It's something more radical, using your wounds as raw material to build something greater. It's the difference between being a victim of circumstances and being an artist of your own life. Think of people who went through tragedies and came out stronger. Not because the tragedy was good, but because they chose to use that pain as fuel. They took what could have destroyed them and turned it into the source of their own strength. This doesn't happen automatically. It's a conscious, difficult choice that needs to be made every day. Transforming adversities into strength isn't about pretending pain doesn't exist or that everything will work out in the end. It's about recognizing that you have two options when something bad happens. Either you surrender to the role of victim, or you use that experience to become more resilient, wiser, more compassionate. Great artists have always done this. Their best works were born from their worst moments. Beethoven composing symphonies even when deaf. Van Gogh painting beauty even in deep depression. Johnny Cash singing about redemption after a life of addictions. The most powerful art comes from transforming pain into beauty. The weak do the opposite. They collect wounds like medals, use trauma as an excuse not to grow. They victimize themselves because they discovered that it gets attention, sympathy, excuses for not trying. They prefer to be important victims than anonymous winners. It's easier to explain failure by circumstance than to take responsibility for success. The culture of victimization has become an epidemic. Everyone competing to see who suffered more, who has more right to complain, who deserves more compassion. It's a perverse competition where the prize is never having to take responsibility for your own life. And this creates a vicious cycle. The more you identify as a victim, the more of a victim you become. The more you focus on what was done to you, the less energy remains to do something. It's a mental trap that keeps people stuck in the past forever. This means learning the lost art of saying no. No to opportunities that don't serve you. No to people who drain your energy. No to commitments that don't make sense. Weaklings disguised as virtuous people never say no because they're afraid of disappointing. They prefer to disappoint themselves for a lifetime rather than disappoint a stranger for 5 minutes. And you know what's ironic? When you learn to say no, people start respecting you more because you finally became someone who has standards, who has limits, who has self-worth. Nobody respects those who accept anything. Everyone wants what's hard to get. Everyone values those who value themselves. The art of saying no is one of the most important skills you can develop. Because every time you say yes to something you shouldn't, you're saying no to something you should. Your time and energy are limited. Wasting them on unimportant things means not having resources for important things. But this requires real courage. Not that performative courage from social media. Courage to disappoint, to be misunderstood, to be alone when necessary. Most people prefer others' approval over their own approval. And then, they spend their whole lives being strangers to themselves. The courage to say no starts with a simple question. Does this bring me closer to my goals or further away from them? If the answer is further away, you know what to do. It seems simple, but in practice, it's one of the hardest things there is because it goes against years of social conditioning. Since childhood, you were trained to be nice, to not disappoint, to always say yes. They told you this would make you loved, accepted, cherished. But actually, this made you invisible, used, disrespected. Because people without limits aren't loved, they're convenient. And when you learn to say no to what doesn't matter, energy remains to say yes to what really counts. That's when you discover your creativity, your life force, your capacity to create instead of just consume. Because being creative is the opposite of following the herd. It's taking what exists and transforming it into something that never existed before. Creativity is dangerous because it questions the status quo. When you create something new, you're implicitly saying that what existed before wasn't enough. This bothers those who got comfortable with things as they are. That's why every society tries to suffocate creativity. It's a threat to the established order. But creativity isn't just about art. It's about every way of solving problems in an original manner. It's about seeing connections that others don't see. It's about having the courage to try something that might go wrong. It's about being willing to be ridiculous to eventually be brilliant. But look at the world today. Creativity has become a crime. Everyone wants you to fit in the box, to think inside the square, to not rock the boat. Social media are perfect machines of conformism. They take unique people and turn them into poor copies of each other. Everyone posting the same thing, thinking the same thoughts, having the same opinions. It's as if there was an invisible manual on how to be a person, and everyone was afraid to go off script. You see this in trends, in memes, in opinions that go viral. Nobody wants to be the first to think differently, but everyone wants to be the second. It's intellectual cowardice disguised as social consciousness. The algorithm of social media intensifies this. It learns what you like and gives you more of the same. It puts you in a bubble where everyone thinks alike, acts alike, has the same fears and the same certainties. And you leave this bubble thinking you represent the whole world. It's voluntary brainwashing. This uniformization is deadly for society. Progress comes from diversity of ideas, from constructive conflict between different perspectives, from constant experimentation. When everyone thinks alike, nobody thinks much. It's stagnation disguised as harmony. And social media have turned this into a science. They know exactly how to keep you addicted, how to make you spend more time consuming content, how to make you buy things you don't need. You're not a user, you're a product. Your data, your attention, your desires are sold to whoever pays more. The worst part is that many people confuse this search for online approval with real virtue. They think being on the right side of the internet is the same as doing the right thing in life. But real virtue doesn't need an audience. It happens when no one is watching, when it won't get any likes, when it might even hurt you. Real virtue is the father who works 2 jobs to support his family and never complains. It's the mother who takes care of her sick child and never posts about it. It's the neighbor who helps the elderly person with groceries without expecting recognition. It's silent. It's consistent. It's costly. It has nothing to do with online virtue signaling. The difference between real virtue and performative virtue is that the first costs something. It costs time, energy, money, comfort. The second only costs a few typed characters. One requires personal sacrifice. The other requires only public positioning. And real virtue is often invisible. Nobody sees, nobody applauds, nobody recognizes. It's done not to impress others, but to be able to sleep peacefully with your own conscience. It's internal satisfaction, not external validation. The difference between genuine empathy and moral performance is this. Empathy comes from strength. Performance comes from weakness. When you're strong, you can afford to be kind. When you're weak, you need to prove to everyone that you're good. It's like the difference between being confident and being insecure. Those who are confident don't need to keep saying they're confident. People with real empathy don't make a big deal about it. They simply help when they can, understand when it's necessary, forgive when it's possible. They don't need to announce it on the moral megaphone of social media. Those who perform spend more energy proving they're good than actually being good. True empathy is expensive. It requires you to actually care about others' suffering, even when it's inconvenient for you. It requires you to take action, to make sacrifices, to leave your comfort zone. It's not a feeling. It's a commitment. Moral performance is cheap. It's retweeting a cause, signing an online petition, using a hashtag. All things that make you feel good about yourself without costing practically anything. It's moral masturbation. Lots of pleasure, no real consequences. And this brings us to one of the most interesting phenomena of our times: cancel culture. Here you see weaklings disguised as virtuous people in full action. They destroy people not for justice, but for power. It's the revenge of the mediocre against anyone who dares to be different. They know they'll never create anything, so they dedicate themselves to destroying those who create. Canceling has become the favorite sport of those who never built anything in their lives. It's easier to tear down than to build up. Easier to point out mistakes than to get things right. Easier to destroy reputations than to build something of value. It's the democratization of resentment. Now, anyone can feel powerful by destroying someone more successful. And the most perverse thing is, they do this in the name of virtue. They say they're fighting for justice, for equality, for a better world. But if you look closely, you'll see they're always the same profiles. Frustrated people who couldn't achieve their own dreams, who can't stand seeing others succeed. Cancel culture is the opposite of real justice. Real justice is impartial, proportional, based on evidence. Counseling is emotional, disproportional, based on mob rule. It's moral lynching disguised as social consciousness, and it works through fear. Nobody wants to be the next one canceled, so everyone behaves. Everyone walks on eggshells. Everyone avoids dangerous topics. Everyone repeats only approved opinions. It's censorship through intimidation. The problem is, this is killing any possibility of real innovation. People are so afraid of making mistakes that they stop trying. They prefer to hide behind safe opinions rather than risk having an original idea. It's as if an entire generation chose to be audience instead of artists. When you live in fear of being canceled, you stop saying what you really think. You stop asking uncomfortable questions. You stop questioning established narratives. You become a robot that repeats approved phrases, that thinks certified thoughts, that feels permitted feelings. It's intellectual death. And content creators themselves self-censor. They know exactly which subjects they can touch, which opinions they can express, which jokes they can make. They've created a mental list of what's allowed and what's forbidden. And then the content becomes pasteurized, without personality, without risk, without life. This creates an environment where mediocrity is rewarded and excellence is punished, where it's safer to be generic than specific, safer to be boring than interesting, safer to be predictable than surprising. It's the triumph of sameness over originality. This reflects even in the professional world. Everyone wants to be a specialist. Nobody wants to be a pioneer. Specialization has become synonymous with conformity. You get a degree, join a company, follow protocols, don't question anything. It's comfortable, it's safe, and it's completely lifeless. Companies have also gotten into this. They prefer to hire predictable people who won't cause problems, who won't question processes, who will fit into the culture. Innovation became a pretty word in PowerPoints, but in practice, nobody wants to take the risk of trying something different. The result is an economy of fear. Everyone doing the same thing in the same way, expecting different results. And when the results don't come, they blame the market, the competition, the crisis, anything but their own mediocrity. Companies today are afraid of their own employees, afraid that someone will sue for harassment, afraid that someone will complain about discrimination, afraid that someone will record a conversation and post it online. Everyone walks on eggshells creating policies about policies, bureaucratizing any human interaction. And this kills spontaneity, creativity, genuine connection between people. When everyone is always legally protecting themselves, nobody can be authentic. Professional relationships become theater, where everyone is playing the role of model employee. But what if you did differently? What if instead of specializing to fit in, you developed yourself to stand out? What if instead of following rules, you created your own? This doesn't mean being rebellious for the sake of being rebellious. That's teenager stuff. It means having the courage to think with your own head. Extraordinary people have always been misfits. They didn't fit the patterns of their time, didn't follow established rules, didn't think like everyone else. And because of this, they were criticized, rejected, sometimes even persecuted. But they were also the ones who changed the world. Do you think Van Gogh worried if his paintings were fashionable? That Einstein cared if his theories sounded crazy? That Steve Jobs asked focus groups if he should invent the iPhone? They followed their obsessions regardless of others' opinions, and they created things nobody imagined possible. Genius always seemed like madness to contemporaries because genius is seeing what nobody else sees, doing what nobody else does, believing what nobody else believes. It's an act of radical faith in your own vision, even when the whole world is saying you're wrong. But genius isn't luck or innate talent. It's courage, applied consistently. It's the courage to follow an idea to the end, even when it seems impossible. It's the courage to fail 1,000 times to get it right once. It's the courage to be different when everyone wants to be the same. Nietzsche talked about something called amor fati, loving your fate but not in the passive sense of accepting anything, in the active sense of embracing your whole story, including the bad parts and using all of it as fuel to become who you can be. It's the difference between being a victim of your past and being the author of your future. All your experiences, including the painful ones, shaped who you are today. Your mistakes taught you more than your successes. Your losses showed you what really matters. Your falls gave you strength to get up. If you could erase something from your past, you wouldn't be you anymore. Amorati isn't conformism. It's not passively accepting any situation. It's recognizing that you can't change what already happened, but you can choose how to react to it. It's transforming resentment into fuel, trauma into wisdom, failure into experience. But this doesn't mean romanticizing trauma or glorifying suffering. It means recognizing that you're a product of your entire history, not just the happy moments. It means stopping wasting energy, wishing things had been different, and starting to use that energy to make the future better. The weak life trapped in the past, ruminating grudges, blaming circumstances. They think life owes them something for having suffered. They want compensation. They want the world to apologize. They want others to pay for the injustices they suffered. It's a mental prison they built themselves. The difference between those who grow through suffering and those who are destroyed by it isn't in the intensity of pain. It's in the response to pain. Some use suffering as an excuse to give up. Others use it as a reason to fight harder. Some let it define who they are. Others decide what they'll do with it. This requires what he called will to power. Not power over others, but power over yourself. The capacity to discipline yourself, to develop yourself, to grow even when it's hard. Weaklings disguised as virtuous people want power over others because they don't have power over themselves. They want to control the world because they can't even control their own impulses. Will to power is waking up early when you want to sleep more. It's studying when you'd rather watch Netflix. It's working out when you don't feel like it. It's having difficult conversations when it's easier to avoid them. It's doing what needs to be done regardless of how you feel. It's discipline transformed into character. Real power isn't about domination. It's about self-determination. It's about being able to direct your own life instead of being directed by circumstances. It's about creating your own opportunities instead of waiting for them to appear. It's about being the protagonist instead of the supporting character. But most people confuse power with brute force, with domination, with making others obey. That's false power, weak power. Real power is internal. It's the capacity to command yourself, to direct your own life, to make decisions based on principles, not impulses. When you have power over yourself, you don't need power over others. You don't need anyone to validate your choices, approve your decisions, applaud your successes. You're self-sufficient, and this independence is what most scares the weak. They can't manipulate someone who doesn't need anything from them. Will to power also means being willing to pay the price of growth. Growth hurts. It requires you to let old versions of yourself die. It requires you to abandon comfortable beliefs. It requires you to face inconvenient truths. Most people prefer the familiar pain of stagnation to the unknown pain of growth. But real power is more subtle. It's the capacity to see things from multiple angles without losing your principles. It's having mental flexibility without being spineless. It's understanding that truth is complex without giving up the search for it. Nietzsche called this perspectivism, and it's a crucial skill for not becoming just another herd follower. Most people think in absolute terms. For them, you're either 100% right or 100% wrong. You're either hero or villain. You're either on the side of good or the side of evil. This binary mentality is comfortable because it doesn't require reflection, but it's also dangerous because it ignores the complexity of reality. People with perspectivism can see that the same situation can have various interpretations, that the same person can have good and bad aspects, that the same idea can be useful in one context and harmful in another. They don't get trapped in a single worldview. Perspectivism isn't moral relativism where everything goes and nothing matters. It's recognizing that you always see reality through the lenses of your experience, your culture, your prejudices, and that others might be seeing through different lenses. This doesn't make all perspectives equally valid, but it makes it important to consider multiple perspectives before drawing conclusions. This doesn't mean moral relativism, where everything goes and nothing matters. It means recognizing that reality is complex, that there are nuances, that sometimes there's no simple answer to complicated questions. It's the difference between sophisticated thinking and simplistic thinking. Sophisticated thinking is capable of maintaining tensions without immediately resolving them. It's capable of living with ambiguity, with uncertainty, with complexity. Simplistic thinking wants easy answers, clear categories, absolute certainties. The first is uncomfortable but growing. The second is comfortable but limiting. Because the problem with the weak isn't just that they're weak, it's that they want everyone else to be weak too. They've created a system where strength is seen as violence, where excellence is seen as arrogance, where wanting to grow is seen as selfishness. It's an upside-down world where mediocrity became virtue. They do this because others' strength exposes their own weakness. Others' excellence reveals their mediocrity. Others' growth shows their stagnation. Instead of being inspired to improve, they prefer to drag everyone down. It's easier to level down than to make the effort to rise up. And they've created an entire ideology to justify this. They say competition is toxic, that wanting to stand out is narcissism, that pursuing excellence is privilege. They've transformed laziness into social consciousness, envy into sense of justice, mediocrity into humility. It's brilliant in its perversity. This ideology of mediocrity spreads through apparently positive mantras. Everyone is special, which means nobody is special. What matters is participating, which devalues victory. We can't hurt anyone's feelings, which prevents honest feedback. These are ideas that sound nice, but are destructive in practice. The result is a society that punishes merit and rewards victimization, where it matters more where you came from than where you're going, where your achievements are worth less than your excuses, where it's more important to seem politically correct than to be factually right. And then you need to make a crucial choice. Either you accept the values that have been shoved down your throat since childhood, or you create your own. This is what Nietzsche called transvaluation. Not just questioning existing values, but creating new ones based on your experience, your reflection, your real life. It's not about rejecting everything your parents taught or everything society defends. It's about examining each value and asking, does this make sense for my life? Does this help me grow? Does this make me a better person? If the answer is yes, you keep it. If it's no, you discard it. If it's maybe, you investigate more. Transvaluation is a dangerous and necessary process. Dangerous because you lose the security of following established rules. Necessary because you gain the freedom to live according to your own principles. It's trading external certainty for internal authenticity. Most people never do this process. They live their whole lives operating with mental software they never updated. They use outdated maps to navigate a reality that has completely changed. And then they wonder why they feel lost. Creating your own values is a dangerous process because you lose the comfortable certainty of following something established. You assume total responsibility for your choices. You can't blame education, family, society anymore. If it goes wrong, it's your fault. But if it goes right, the credit is yours too. Total responsibility is terrifying for those who spent their whole lives blaming others. But it's liberating for those who are ready to take control, because if you're responsible for your problems, you're also capable of creating your solutions. But this isn't done alone. You need relationships based on mutual growth, not mutual comfort. You need friends who challenge you, not who flatter you. You need people who inspire you to be better, not who make you feel good about being worse. Most relationships today are based on validation. You validate me. I validate you. And everyone stays in the same mediocrity forever. Growth relationships are uncomfortable. They force you out of your comfort zone. They show you your blind spots. They confront you when you're being dishonest with yourself. They're relationships that prioritize your development over your immediate emotional comfort. Most people run from this type of relationship. They prefer friends who agree with everything, partners who don't question anything, colleagues who don't challenge their ideas. It's easier, more comfortable, but it's also deadly for personal growth. Relationships based only on mutual comfort become echo chambers where the same ideas are repeated infinitely. Nobody grows, nobody questions, nobody improves. It's stagnation disguised as harmony. Real relationships are different. They force you to grow even when you don't want to. They show you your blind spots even when it hurts. They push you out of your comfort zone even when you'd rather stay in bed. They're relationships based on tough love, not soft love. Tough love is when someone tells you truths you don't want to hear because they care about your growth. It's when someone challenges you to be better, even risking you getting annoyed. It's when someone doesn't enable your excuses because they believe in your potential. Most people mistake this for lack of support. They want friends who always agree, who always support, who never question. But real support sometimes means saying no. Sometimes it means not enabling destructive behaviors. Sometimes it means being the voice of conscience you don't want to hear. Soft love is more common because it's easier. It's saying everything's okay when it's not. It's pretending not to see obvious problems. It's being complicit in the self-destruction of someone you say you love. It's comfortable in the short term, but destructive in the long term. And when you find these people, you naturally become a positive influence too. Not because you're preaching to others, but because you lead by example. You show that it's possible to live differently, think differently, be differently. You become living proof that it's not mandatory to be mediocre. Leadership by example is the most powerful type of influence. It's not about convincing anyone of anything. It's about living so authentically and successfully that others naturally become interested in what you do. It's attraction, not promotion. When you're genuinely well with yourself, people notice. There's something in your energy, in your confidence, in your inner peace that attracts others. They might not be able to explain what it is, but they want to have it too. And then they start asking questions, asking for advice, being inspired by your example. But leadership by example requires that you really live what you preach. It can't be a facade. It can't be performance. People feel the difference between authenticity and acting, and they only get inspired by what's real. But this requires balancing independence and connection. You can't become a lone wolf who despises everyone. That would just be pride, disguised as strength. You need to participate in society without being swallowed by it. You need to be in the world without being of the world. It's a delicate dance between maintaining your individuality and contributing to the collective. Balance is difficult because extremes are easier. It's easier to be totally independent and not care about anyone, or to be totally dependent and let others decide your life. But wisdom is in the middle. Being strong enough to not need approval but connected enough to contribute something. You can be unique without being lonely. You can have your own principles without despising others. You can follow your path without ignoring that others also have valid paths. It's a matter of emotional and intellectual maturity. True maturity is being able to stay true to your own values while respecting others' values. It's being able to disagree without demonizing. It's being able to compete without destroying. It's being able to win without humiliating. It's strength with humanity. And this brings us to the question of purpose. Most people live borrowed purposes. Being successful, by whose definition? Being happy, whose happiness? Being normal. Normal according to whom? They never stop to ask, what do I want to do with my life? What is my mission here? Borrowed purpose is like borrowed clothes. It never fits right. You might be able to wear it for a while, but you'll always be uncomfortable. You'll always have the feeling that it's not really yours, that it doesn't match who you are. Society offers ready-made purposes. Be rich, be famous, be approved, be safe. But these generic purposes don't take into account your unique personality, your specific talents, your particular experiences. They're cake recipes for a life that isn't yours. Borrowed purposes are like broken GPS. They take you to places you don't want to be. You follow the instructions perfectly, do everything you should do, and still feel lost because you are following someone else's map to someone else's life. Creating your own life mission is perhaps the most important thing you can do. Because when you have a clear purpose, decisions become easy. You know what to accept and what to refuse. You know when to fight and when to let it pass. You know what's worth your time and what's a distraction. You become the protagonist of your own story instead of an extra in someone else's. But discovering your purpose isn't like finding buried treasure. It's not something that already exists waiting for you to find. It's something you build day after day through your choices, your actions, reflection on what really matters to you. Your purpose emerges from the intersection between what you're good at doing, what you like to do, what the world needs, and what can sustain you financially. It's not about finding the perfect passion. It's about creating meaning through consistent action. And purpose isn't about finding something grandiose that will change the world. It can be something simple like being a good father, creating art that moves people, solving problems through technology. What matters isn't the size of the impact, but the authenticity of the motivation. And here we arrive at nature's most misunderstood concept, the overman. Everyone thinks it's about superiority, about being better than others, but it's exactly the opposite. It's about overcoming your own limitations, your own fears, your own excuses. It's about becoming the best version of yourself, not the worst version of someone else. The overman isn't a superhero. It's not someone who was born special or has magical powers. It's an ordinary person who decided to stop accepting their limitations as definitive, who decided to grow beyond what they thought was possible, who decided to create instead of just consume. Everyone can become a better version of themselves. It doesn't matter where you came from, how old you are, how many mistakes you've made. What matters is the decision to start today building who you can be tomorrow. It's a process, not a destination. The overman isn't a destination. It's a direction. It's not a place you arrive. It's a path you walk. It's the constant commitment to grow, to learn, to improve, even when it's hard, even when nobody is watching, even when it won't bring any recognition. It's pure strength applied to your own development. It's about doing a little more than you did yesterday. Reading a little more, training a little more, creating a little more, risking a little more. These are small increments that over time produce dramatic transformations. It's like compound interest applied to personal growth. The difference between extraordinary people and ordinary people isn't initial talent. It's consistency over time. It's the daily decision to improve. Even when it's boring, even when it's hard, even when you don't feel like it. It's discipline transformed into character. And this brings us back to the beginning. Weaklings disguised as virtuous people. Now you can identify them better. They're the people who talk a lot and do little, who have opinions about everything but experience in nothing, who want to change the world but can't change themselves, who preach virtue but practice mediocrity. They're easy to identify once you know what to look for. They always have ready excuses for why they can't grow. They always have imaginary enemies that prevent them from succeeding. They always have theories about why the system is unfair, but never have strategies to thrive within it. They spend more energy explaining why they can't than trying to figure out how they can. They prefer to be right about their problems than wrong about their solutions. It's more comfortable to be a competent victim than an incompetent protagonist. And the most tragic thing is, they can be genuinely intelligent, talented, capable, but they waste all of this on resentment, on justifications, on moral performance. It's like watching someone use a Ferrari to deliver pizza. It technically works, but it's an absurd waste of potential. But more important than identifying them is not becoming one of them. And this means having the courage to be imperfectly yourself instead of perfectly someone else. It means choosing growth over comfort, truth over approval, strength over posing. It means creating your own values instead of inheriting others' values. It's a choice you need to make not once but every day because the temptation to return to the herd is constant. It's easier to follow. It's safer to agree. It's more comfortable not to stand out. Resisting this temptation requires willpower renewed constantly. But every time you choose authenticity over approval, you become a little stronger. Every time you act based on your principles instead of what others expect, you build a little more character. It's like muscle. The more you exercise it, the stronger it gets. Because in the end, you have two options. Either you live your own life, or you live the life others want you to live. Either you create your own values, or you follow values created by people who might not even be alive anymore. Either you become who you can be, or you stay being who you've always been. The choice is yours. But choose consciously, not out of laziness. Choose based on reflection, not impulse. Choose knowing it will be hard, that it will be lonely sometimes, that it will be misunderstood many times, but also knowing it's the only way to live a life worth living infinite times. If this content made you reflect on your own life and your own choices, subscribe to the channel for more reflections that will help you get out of mediocrity and build an extraordinary life. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, share this video. Give it a like if you're ready to stop pretending virtue and start practicing real strength.